Ladies and gentlemen, hidden behind thick stone walls in the small town of Huntsville, Texas, stands one of the most infamous prisons in American history, the Walls Unit. Officially known as the Huntsville Unit, this prison is not just another correctional facility. It is the place where Texas carries out executions, making it a powerful symbol of crime, punishment, justice, and controversy in the United States. Built in 1849, the Walls Unit is the oldest prison in Texas still in operation. For over a century and a half, it has housed some of the most dangerous and notorious criminals in the state. But what truly sets it apart is its role as the execution center for Texas, the state that leads the nation in the number of executions. Inside the Walls Unit is the death chamber, where lethal injections are administered. Since lethal injection replaced the electric chair in 1982, hundreds of executions have taken place here. The chamber itself is stark and clinical, a sharp contrast to the heavy moral weight of what happens inside it. Witnesses, including victims' families, media members, and officials, watch from behind glass as the final sentence is carried out. Supporters of the death penalty argue that the Walls Unit represents justice, a place where society holds the most violent offenders accountable for their crimes. For them, it offers closure to victims' families and serves as a deterrent to violent crime. However, critics see the Walls Unit as a symbol of deep flaws in the American justice system. They point to cases of wrongful convictions, racial bias, mental illness among death row inmates, and ethical concerns surrounding capital punishment. For many, the prison raises a difficult question. Can justice truly be served by taking a life? Beyond executions, the Walls Unit also functions as a maximum security prison. Its aging structure, overcrowding, and strict conditions highlight broader issues within the U.S. prison system, including inmate treatment and prison reform. The Walls Unit is more than concrete and steel. It is a place where law, morality, pain, and power collide. It forces America to confront uncomfortable truths about punishment, human rights, and the value of life itself. In the end, the Walls Unit stands not only as a prison, but as a mirror, reflecting America's ongoing struggle to balance justice with humanity. The Walls Unit is located in the city of Huntsville, Texas, a small town that has become nationally and internationally recognized because of its deep connection to the Texas prison system. Huntsville is often referred to as the prison city of Texas because it houses several correctional facilities and serves as the administrative headquarters of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ. At the center of this identity stands the Walls Unit, officially known as the Huntsville Unit, a prison whose presence has shaped the town's history, economy, and public image for generations. The prison is situated near the heart of Huntsville, surrounded by everyday life, homes, schools, and businesses, creating a striking contrast between normal civilian activity and the severe realities that exist behind its tall stone walls. Unlike many modern prisons built in remote areas, the Walls Unit's central location reflects its historical origins, dating back to a time when prisons were constructed close to population centers for accessibility and control. As the official Huntsville Unit, the facility holds a unique status within the Texas correctional system. It is not merely a housing unit for inmates, but a critical operational center for capital punishment in the state. Because of its location and long-standing role, Huntsville has become synonymous with executions in Texas, drawing media attention, protesters, witnesses, and officials whenever an execution is scheduled. The presence of the Walls Unit has also influenced the social and cultural landscape of Huntsville. Many residents are employed directly or indirectly by the prison system, while others have grown accustomed to the routine security measures and public demonstrations that accompany execution days. This close proximity between a functioning community and a maximum security execution site highlights the complex relationship between society and the institutions created to enforce law and punishment. The Huntsville Unit's location is therefore not just a geographic detail, but a defining characteristic that connects the prison to Texas history, criminal justice administration, and national debates surrounding incarceration and capital punishment. The Walls Unit holds a unique and significant place in Texas history because it is the oldest prison in the state still in operation, having been built in 1849, only a few years after Texas became part of the United States. Its construction reflects an era when the criminal justice system was far more punitive and physical in nature, focusing heavily on confinement, labor, and strict discipline rather than rehabilitation. The prison was originally designed to enforce order through isolation and hard labor, ideas that were common in the 19th century penal system. The age of the Walls Unit is evident in its architecture. Built primarily from thick limestone walls, the structure was designed to be imposing and inescapable, sending a clear message about authority and control. Unlike modern correctional facilities that rely on advanced surveillance technology, the Walls Unit was constructed at a time when physical barriers, narrow corridors, iron bars, and limited natural light were the primary means of maintaining security. These features contribute to its reputation as a harsh and intimidating environment. Over the decades, the prison has witnessed dramatic changes in American society, law, and punishment. It has survived the Civil War, Reconstruction, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, and modern legal reforms, all while continuing to function as an active correctional facility. Each period left its mark on how the prison was used and how inmates were treated, turning the Walls Unit into a living record of the evolution of punishment in Texas. Despite renovations and updates, much of the original structure remains in use, creating ongoing challenges. Aging infrastructure has raised concerns about safety, overcrowding, and humane living conditions. The continued use of a 19th century prison in the 21st century has fueled debates about whether such an old facility can meet modern standards of justice and human rights. The fact that the Walls Unit, built in 1849, remains operational today underscores its symbolic weight. It stands as a physical reminder of how long Texas has relied on incarceration as a central response to crime and how historical approaches to punishment continue to influence the present-day criminal justice system. The Walls Unit has earned national recognition as America's most prominent execution site, largely because of its central role in carrying out death sentences in Texas. While many states once practiced capital punishment, Texas stands apart for both the frequency and consistency with which it has enforced the death penalty, and the Walls Unit has been the physical location where these sentences are carried out. This has made the prison a focal point in national and international discussions about capital punishment. Unlike other states that use multiple facilities or rarely conduct executions, Texas has historically relied on the Walls Unit as its designated execution site. As a result, nearly every execution ordered by Texas courts is carried out within this single prison. This concentration of executions has linked the identity of the Walls Unit directly to death row enforcement, making its name instantly recognizable to journalists, legal scholars, activists, and human rights organizations. Because of this role, the Walls Unit attracts significant attention whenever an execution is scheduled. Media outlets gather outside its gates. Protesters and supporters of the death penalty hold demonstrations, and witnesses assemble to observe the final moments of the condemned. These events transform the prison into a national stage where the debate over justice, punishment, and morality plays out in real time. The prison's reputation as an execution center has also shaped public perception of Texas itself. For many, the Walls Unit symbolizes the state's tough stance on crime and its willingness to apply the harshest punishment allowed by law. For others, it represents the extreme end of punitive justice and raises concerns about human rights, fairness, and the risk of irreversible error. Through decades of repeated executions, the Walls Unit has become more than just a correctional facility. It stands as a powerful institution where the authority of the state is exercised in its most final form, reinforcing its status as America's most notorious and closely watched execution site. Texas has long held the position of leading the United States in a number of executions, a distinction that has deeply influenced both its criminal justice identity and a national conversation on capital punishment. Since the reinstatement of the death penalty in the United States in 1976, Texas has carried out significantly more executions than any other state, often exceeding the totals of several states combined. This consistent pattern has set Texas apart as the most active enforcer of capital punishment in modern American history. Several factors contribute to Texas's high execution numbers. The state has some of the toughest criminal sentencing laws in the country, particularly for capital murder cases. Prosecutors in Texas are more likely to seek the death penalty, and juries have historically been more willing to impose it compared to those in many other states. In addition, Texas has a relatively fast and efficient appeals process, which results in death sentences being carried out more quickly than in states where legal reviews can take decades. Political culture has also played a major role. Strong support for law and order policies, combined with public backing for harsh punishments, has reinforced the use of the death penalty as a tool for justice. State leaders have often defended executions as necessary for deterrence, public safety, and closure for victims' families, further solidifying Texas's commitment to capital punishment. The large number of executions has drawn intense scrutiny from legal experts, human rights organizations, and international observers. Critics argue that the high execution rate increases the risk of wrongful convictions, especially in cases involving racial disparities, inadequate legal representation, or defendants with mental illness or intellectual disabilities. These concerns have led to numerous legal challenges and protests, many of which focus directly on Texas's practices. Texas's position as the nation's leading execution state has made it a central case study in debates about the death penalty. The sheer volume of executions carried out by the state has amplified questions about justice, fairness, and the moral limits of government power, placing Texas, and the Walls Unit in particular, at the center of one of America's most controversial legal and ethical issues. The Walls Unit is most widely known for housing Texas's death chamber, the highly secured area where executions are carried out by lethal injection. This chamber represents the final stage of the state's capital punishment process, where court decisions that may have taken decades to reach are ultimately enforced. Its presence within the Walls Unit makes the prison one of the most consequential facilities in the American criminal justice system. The death chamber is designed to be controlled, sterile, and strictly regulated. Inmates sentenced to death are transferred from death row facilities to the Walls Unit shortly before their execution date. On the scheduled day, they are escorted under heavy security to the chamber, where the execution protocol is carried out according to state procedures. The room includes the execution gurney, intravenous equipment, and monitoring systems used to administer the lethal injection and confirm death. Adjacent to the execution room are witness chambers, separated by glass, where official witnesses observe the procedure. These witnesses typically include family members of the victim, representatives chosen by the condemned inmate, media witnesses, and prison officials. Their presence is intended to provide transparency and legal accountability, yet it also underscores the gravity and emotional intensity of the event. Lethal injection, adopted as a more humane alternative to previous execution methods, involves administering a series of drugs intended to sedate, paralyze, and ultimately stop the heart. Despite this intention, the process has been the subject of significant controversy. Questions have been raised about drug availability, execution complications, and whether the method truly minimizes suffering, making the death chamber a focal point for ethical and legal debate. The existence of the death chamber within the Walls Unit defines the prison's identity more than any other feature. It transforms the facility from a place of confinement into a site where the state exercises its ultimate authority over life and death, reinforcing the Walls Unit's reputation as one of the most powerful and controversial institutions in the United States. In 1982, the Walls Unit marked a major turning point in the history of capital punishment when lethal injection officially replaced the electric chair as the primary method of execution in Texas. This change reflected a broader national shift in how executions were carried out, as states sought methods that were perceived to be more modern, clinical, and humane compared to older forms of execution that were increasingly viewed as brutal and inhumane. Before this transition, Executions of the Walls Unit were carried out using the electric chair, a method that involves strapping the condemned inmate to a chair and administering powerful electrical currents to cause death. The electric chair had long been controversial due to its violent physical effects, including visible suffering, burns, and, in some cases, prolonged deaths. As public awareness of these outcomes grew, legal challenges and moral objections intensified, placing pressure on states like Texas to adopt alternative methods. Lethal injection was introduced as a solution that would appear more medical and less visibly violent. The procedure was designed to resemble a clinical process involving intravenous drugs rather than physical force. Texas became the first state in the United States to carry out an execution by lethal injection, and the Walls Unit became the site where this new method was implemented. This moment placed the prison at the center of a historic transformation in execution practices nationwide. Despite its intended purpose, lethal injection has not escaped controversy. Over time, reports of botched executions, difficulties in administering drugs, and debates over the sourcing of execution chemicals have raised serious questions about whether lethal injection truly represents a humane alternative. Legal challenges surrounding cruel and unusual punishment have continued, often focusing on procedures carried out at facilities like the Walls Unit. The replacement of the electric chair with lethal injection in 1982 permanently altered the role of the Walls Unit. It established the prison as a testing ground for modern execution methods while highlighting the ongoing tension between evolving standards of decency and the continued use of capital punishment in the United States. Supporters of the death penalty often argue that executions carried out at the Walls Unit serve as a form of justice for the most serious crimes, particularly those involving murder. From this perspective, capital punishment is seen as a proportionate response to acts that have caused irreversible harm, reinforcing the idea that certain crimes warrant the highest possible penalty under the law. For many supporters, the Walls Unit represents the final step in holding offenders fully accountable for their actions. A central argument made by advocates is that executions provide closure to victims' families. Families who have endured years or even decades of legal proceedings may view the execution as the moment when the justice process is finally completed. After long trials, appeals, and delays, the carrying out of a death sentence can symbolize the end of uncertainty and emotional strain, allowing families to begin healing without the constant reminder of the offender's continued existence within the prison system. Supporters also believe that executions affirm the value of the victim's life. By imposing the ultimate punishment, the state sends a message that the crime committed was profoundly serious and that the loss suffered by the victim and their loved ones is recognized at the highest level. In this view, capital punishment is not about revenge, but about moral balance and societal condemnation of extreme violence. In addition, proponents argue that the death penalty helps maintain public confidence in the justice system. They claim that when courts impose and carry out death sentences, it demonstrates the system's ability to enforce laws decisively and protect society from individuals deemed beyond rehabilitation. The Walls Unit, therefore, becomes a symbol of firmness and resolve in addressing violent crime. For supporters, the executions conducted at the Walls Unit are seen as a necessary and lawful conclusion to the justice process, one that honors victims, reinforces accountability, and reflects society's demand for consequences in cases of the most severe criminal acts. Critics of the Walls Unit and the death penalty argue that the prison has come to symbolize deep systemic flaws within the American criminal justice system. One of the most serious concerns raised is the risk of wrongful convictions. Because executions are irreversible, critics stress that even a single mistake results in the loss of an innocent life. Over the years, multiple cases in Texas have revealed convictions later overturned due to new evidence, faulty forensic science, false confessions, or ineffective legal representation, intensifying fears that some executed individuals may not have been guilty. Racial bias is another major issue frequently linked to the Walls Unit and Texas's use of capital punishment. Studies and legal analyses have shown that defendants of color, particularly African Americans, are more likely to receive the death penalty, especially when the victim is white. Critics argue that these disparities reflect broader inequalities in policing, prosecution, jury selection, and sentencing, rather than differences in the severity of crimes. The Walls Unit, as the final site where these sentences are carried out, becomes a visible endpoint of these racial injustices. Concerns are also raised about the quality of legal defense provided to many death row inmates. Critics point out that defendants who cannot afford experienced attorneys often rely on underfunded or overworked public defenders, increasing the likelihood of errors during trials. Inadequate investigation, failure to present mitigating evidence, and limited access to expert witnesses can all contribute to unfair convictions that ultimately lead to execution at the Walls Unit. Mental illness and intellectual disability further complicate the ethical debate. Critics argue that executing individuals who suffer from severe mental health conditions undermines basic principles of human rights and justice. Although legal protections exist, opponents claim that these safeguards are inconsistently applied, allowing vulnerable individuals to pass through the system and face execution despite diminished responsibility. For critics, the Walls Unit is not merely a prison, but a powerful symbol of how systemic bias, legal inequality, and human error can converge within capital punishment, raising profound questions about whether a system with such flaws should be entrusted with the power to take a life. The Walls Unit highlights serious structural challenges within the American prison system, particularly aging infrastructure and overcrowding. Built in 1849, the prison was never designed to meet the demands of a modern correctional facility. Its original layout, narrow cell blocks, limited ventilation, and outdated utilities reflect 19th century construction standards, making it difficult to adapt the building to current safety, health, and security requirements. As the prison population in Texas expanded over time, the Walls Unit was forced to house more inmates than it was originally intended to accommodate. This overcrowding has placed additional strain on an already aging structure, leading to cramped living conditions, reduced access to basic services, and increased tension within the facility. Overcrowding also complicates prison management, making it more difficult for staff to maintain order and ensure the safety of both inmates and correctional officers. The outdated infrastructure affects more than just space. Electrical systems, plumbing, and climate control are often insufficient, creating uncomfortable and sometimes unsafe living environments. In Texas's extreme heat, inadequate cooling can pose serious health risks, particularly for elderly inmates or those with medical conditions. Critics argue that these conditions may fall short of modern standards for humane treatment. Aging facilities like the Walls Unit also raise financial and ethical questions. Maintaining and repairing such an old structure is costly, yet replacing it or constructing new facilities requires significant public funding. This creates ongoing debate about whether resources should be invested in preserving historic prisons or redirected toward reform, rehabilitation programs, and alternative sentencing. Through its deteriorating structure and capacity challenges, the Walls Unit serves as a clear example of how outdated facilities and overcrowding continue to impact the effectiveness, safety, and humanity of the prison system. The Walls Unit stands as more than a physical prison. It is a symbol of the ongoing moral and ethical debate surrounding capital punishment in the United States. As the primary site for executions in Texas, the prison embodies the tension between the legal authority of the state to punish the most serious crimes and the philosophical and humanitarian questions about whether the state should ever take a human life. Its walls are not only concrete barriers, but also a representation of the societal struggle to reconcile justice with morality. For proponents, the Walls Unit represents the enforcement of law and the affirmation of societal standards. They view capital punishment as a necessary response to the most heinous crimes, ensuring that those who commit murder face consequences proportional to their actions. Supporters argue that the prison provides closure to victims' families, Dieter's violent crime, and demonstrates that society takes the value of human life seriously by punishing those who violate it in the most extreme way. However, opponents see the Walls Unit as a manifestation of the moral dilemmas and potential injustices inherent in the death penalty system. They point to wrongful convictions, racial and economic disparities, mental illness among inmates, and the risk of cruel or unusual punishment. To critics, the very act of execution is ethically troubling, raising questions about whether the state should wield such absolute power over life and death, even under the guise of justice. The prison's notoriety also amplifies the national and international conversation about capital punishment. Every execution at the Walls Unit is observed and scrutinized, not only by witnesses and media, but also by human rights organizations and legal scholars worldwide. The facility thus functions as both a practical execution site and a symbol in a larger debate over morality, law, and human rights. The Walls Unit also forces society to confront difficult questions about the balance between justice and compassion, punishment and rehabilitation, and the limits of government authority. Its very existence serves as a constant reminder that capital punishment is not just a legal process, but a deeply human and ethical issue, reflecting broader tensions in American society about the value of life, the consequences of crime, and the role of the state in determining both. In conclusion, the Walls Unit is not merely a prison hidden behind stone walls in Huntsville, Texas. It is a powerful symbol of America's complex and often controversial approach to justice and punishment. Through its long history, its role as the nation's most active execution site, and the debates it continues to ignite, the Walls Unit reflects the deep tensions between law, morality, and human rights. Whether viewed as a place of justice and accountability, or as a reminder of systemic flaws and ethical concerns, the Walls Unit forces society to confront difficult questions about crime, punishment, and the value of human life. Its legacy continues to shape national discussions on capital punishment, ensuring that the conversation surrounding justice in America remains both urgent and unresolved.